Hello everybody, and welcome to 2017. Over these past several months, I've been spending a little more time alone in meditation, contemplating astrology, and contemplating the kinds of things that I think are important to share with individuals. And on this channel, as you know, there are plenty of videos teaching, going over principles of astrology. We've got books available, regular classes ongoing. And it occurred to me, though, that as an astrologer, one of the roles is to play the role of a seer. That's why in David Frawley's book, it's titled Astrology of the Seers, because the astrologer serves as a junction point to interpret the ideas, the energies, the movements of our collective consciousness, all which are represented by each of the planets. Every planet is an aspect of ourself. I've joked before about writing a book called How to Benefit from Astrology Without Astrology, and what it would focus on would be looking at each planet and how to manifest its higher qualities. And ideally what an astrologer is meant to do is to look at a chart, look at transits and so on, and interpret how is the individual relating to their collective consciousness, relating to the archetypal energies that the planets represent. And if you can do that, and if you can live in the highest and best way in harmony with those things, despite the difficulties, despite the boons that come your way, you're typically able to live a little more fulfilling, meaningful, purposeful, a less difficult life. Now, sometimes you can find joy in difficulty. That's why we have Mars. People with a strong Mars, they like to fight, and there's nothing wrong with fighting as long as it's consensual. That's really the big issue with Mars, isn't it? But as I was going through all this contemplative process these last few months, it occurred to me that maybe we could take some time monthly, we'll see how it goes, rather than just doing a typical transit video where we're looking at transits and saying this will do that and so on. Try to understand what are the archetypal energies doing and how might they be affecting you. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the month of January, and one of my favorite and foremost planets to explore is Saturn. That's why I made sure to get a tattoo of Saturn. That's why I've often done most of my remedial measures for Saturn. Most of the time it's Saturn that people are curious about. So what I've done is I've spent some time in meditation, practicing mantra, attuning with Saturn, with the idea to interpret Saturn's message for us in January of 2017. So that's what we're going to look at today. Now, you have to remember that when I go through these kinds of processes, in my mind, these are aspects of a collective consciousness. And they're being anthropomorphized. Anthropomorphized, is that the right word? I believe it is. Hopefully I'm saying it correctly. So that we can have a conversation, so that we can think about and relate it to our everyday lives. As a yogi, we have to remember that we are the absolute. But as an individual aspect of this greater consciousness, this absolute, we do have to function within this world of duality, where there will be personalities, where there will be conversations, and so on. So I have some notes here, things that came to me as I was contemplating maintaining my idea to commune with the energy of Saturn and what his message might be for this month of January. So first of all, we need to think about Saturn and remember that he deals with things like endurance. He deals with things like managing hardships. He's the planet that allows us to persevere through difficulties. He's also a planet of debt and disease, and a very strict planet that wants you to play by the book, in a sense, and to do things right and correct the first time. And usually that means to do it slowly over time. Now, generally speaking, through Saturn's position astrologically for the month of January, we're going to see he's going to have a prominent influence on our belief systems, our ideals, and there will be challenges around those belief systems and those ideals. And oftentimes we'll see problems with our belief systems and ideals. So one of the things that Saturn shared was the idea to pay attention to those areas of life where you are so invested in things being ideal, about belief systems, about long-term committed relationships, and also about your own long-term commitments. So it's about your ideals, your long-term commitments, and even long-term committed relationships. There can be more struggle, difficulty, setbacks, and delays in those areas of your life. And one of the things that Saturn likes to share is the idea that those problems are not there to cause you to suffer. They're there to cause you to look at what needs to be adjusted. Okay, so that's the first thing we have to remember. Now we're going to have the moon in the 4th from Saturn around January 3rd, January 4th. And that, in a sense, means that Saturn's going to be in the 10th from the moon. So we have to be very cautious during that time period not to get too overly caught up in our emotional nature, because Saturn can make you see all the things that could possibly go wrong, which can make your emotions a little insecure or difficult to rely upon. So during that time period, we have to be aware of the fact that you want to learn to practice some detachment during that time, between January 3rd, January 4th, and so on, probably around January 5th as well, and to not give in too much to your emotions, especially when you're finding that your emotions are getting disturbed by all the things that you could possibly see going wrong. January 4th is a good time period because what's going to be happening is Venus's position from Saturn is going to be more beneficial, and it's going to continue to grow in its gentle nature, its beneficial nature, its graceful nature, clear through January 28th of 2017. And so in that regard, despite the issues of kind of facing one's difficulties in their ideals or having setbacks and delays in their commitments and committed relationships, Venus is giving the capacity to see the possible ways of making corrections and adjustments on your course that lead to higher fulfillment. And it can show an energy of greater comfort as well as you make those changes. So during January, despite the position of Saturn, we are going to find that Venus will be helping and it will be growing stronger throughout the month. Also, January 4th, January 5th, and January 6th, at the same time, as I was going through my contemplations, we saw that Jupiter and Moon will be opposite each other at this time. And that Moon will be in the 5th house from Saturn, which is a good house to find that kind of opposition occurring in. And those are wonderful times to contemplate and meditate upon the kinds of possibilities and opportunities that can arise once you get past all the little things you have to fix that Saturn's making you pay attention to and being very critical of. All right, so we want to be aware that as we get into January 4th and on, not only is Venus going to be helpful, but around the 4th through the 6th, the Moon-Jupiter opposition is going to give you a capacity to see greater opportunities along your path in life. Saturn can also be challenging. We're going to see this a little bit later as I was looking at the charts and doing some more contemplation. Saturn's position in the D9, the Navamsha this month, will put a lot of critical influence on our relationships. That's why we want to pay attention to long-term committed relationships. But again, one of the things that Saturn wants us to understand very clearly is that the criticism or the critical nature of relationships, or the things that we find wrong with relationships, yes, it may be that it's revealing to you these are the problems that you have to move on from, and you have to be able to admit that to yourself and move on. But it can also show that these are the things you simply have to work on to improve your relationships. So anyway, point being that during this month, mainly up through, let's see here, what did I have on my notes? Up through January 20th of 2017, based on Saturn's position in the Navamsha, there will be a lot of influence on being very critical of our relationships, long-term committed relationships, and the people around us as well. Mercury will play a role in this. But the key is to find out, to contemplate, is this criticalness pointing to the fact that I need to make severe changes within my relationship? Or is it pointing out that these are just the problems that we have to work on? All right, now we have to be cautious as we move through this, which is a very Saturnine quality, because between this time period through January 20th, we're going to find that Venus comes into contact with Neptune, both in the zodiac, in the sky by transit, also in the D9, the Navamsha by transit. And so if we're having this experience where we're going to be more critical about who we spend time with, about the things that we have to change about our relationships, you don't necessarily want to make any major changes or major decisions between January 9th and January 11th, because Venus will be very near Neptune, both within the zodiac in the sky and in the Navamsha. And we know that Neptune tends to give us a very fantastical feeling. It makes us a little bit confused about what is actually true and right. And Venus is the planet that's helping Saturn to make decisions that will lead to higher fulfillment in the long run, right? So during that Venus-Neptune transit, we want to avoid any grandiose fantasies about this is the change that I have to make that will make it all better, right? That's what Venus and Neptune will do when it comes into conjunction in transit, in the zodiac, in the sky, but also in the Navamsha. And the reason we have to be cautious about that is because to be successful with Saturn up through January 20th, it requires that we realize that the changes that need to occur in our relationship are due to hard work, to persevering through the difficulties, not a quick fix. So this is a wonderful time to think about your direction in life, your ideal direction in life, what you consider your ideal purpose to be, your long-term committed relationships and what those problems might be there. And think in a longer scale. What do you need to do over the long term? The little small things, very Saturnine quality, the little small things you have to attend to and adjust on a day-to-day basis to improve your situation with long-term committed relationships, with your ideal direction in life and your ideal purpose. Because right now Saturn is looking at those things, and Saturn is pointing out all the little problems that you have to attend to. All right, so Venus is helpful long-term, but not during January 9th through January 11th, where there can be more confusion, more fantasy about what you need to do, and can cause you to act a little more rashly. So I'm correct. We will also have, let's just double check here. We will also have, Mars involved. Right. So Mars, he's not quite in aspect during that time with Neptune and Venus, but he's close enough to bring out more of the rash nature of that Venus-Neptune combination. So remember, what does Saturn want? Slow, steady, incremental changes, not massive changes. I want you to take your time, and I want you to attend to the problems that are there. And with Venus's support, Venus gains stronger, a friend to Saturn. That allows the changes to lead to higher fulfillment as you move through 2017. Now, January 20th, we're going to find that the Sun and Pluto are coming together, conjuncting. And let's double check. I did not look at the Vargas for that, and I feel I should. So let's take a look at that. So January 20th. Okay. So no, Pluto is not involved in the way I would want to see during that time period. Okay. So January 20th, and a little correction there. That will be the end of this particular transit. So let's get specific. All right, so January 7th, there we are. January 7th through January 20th. What we're going to find is Sun and Pluto coming together. And as we all know, this is going to give challenges to status, to rigid constraints about how things should be. And it can often make us feel that our path in life is not able to achieve its goals the way we want to see it, because the Sun represents our divine, clearest, purest manifestation into this world, and Pluto is a challenge to that. Pluto makes us feel like we cannot express that as clearly as we want. And we already know with Saturn, we're having some doubts about our direction, our path in life. So again, with this particular aspect of the transit, Sun and Pluto together between January 7th and then concluding on January 20th. If you do experience more frustration during that time period, again, it's a direction from Saturn to turn oneself within, to plan long-term, to make changes that will lead to higher fulfillment with the benefit of Venus. And that will allow you, once the transit ends with Pluto, to see just what you need to do to live from a state of greater holistic clarity, absolute clarity, versus trying to fight the river by getting all of your ego needs fulfilled. All right, we want to be cautious of that. Now, once we get to January 20th, January 17th through January 20th, we're going to find another Moon-Jupiter combination, a Moon-Jupiter conjunction. These are some of my favorites. So, all this planning, all this digging into what needs to be done, what needs to be changed, you'll find that beginning that change, planting the seeds for that change between January 17th through January 20th can be very good, can be very supported, can be supported well. So you want to proceed with optimism during that time, taking, again, those small steps to achieve your goals, about your long-term purpose, and even changes within your relationship. Now, January 20th, we're going to find Saturn shifting in the sky and shifting his position within the Navamsha, the D9. And this is going to draw you more internal. It's going to make you look more at your psychological processes. It's going to make you have to take some time to confront those little demons, those little negative thought forms, those early childhood memories and conditioning that will prevent you from moving forward with grace and with dignity. So you're going to find that January 20th through the end of January, that once you start moving forward with these new changes within your life, once you start taking those baby steps to move towards your greater purpose, towards more clarity within your relationships and so on, that you're going to become more aware of those inner psychological weaknesses that prevent you from changing for the better. So again, we have to remember, what is Saturn's issue? What is his goal? It's to, in a sense, get you to move beyond your psychological complexes so that you can more fully attune to that inspiration of the sun. That's why Saturn rules over Aquarius, which is those final psychological battles before the freedom of Pisces. So how do you deal with that? Well, I was recently asked that question by a relative of mine, and I said, well, I would often recommend people to work with a counselor to identify these things and move through them. If you don't have a counselor, I would advise that you get the Presence Process by Michael Brown and work through that. Otherwise, what you need to do is tap into Saturn's strength of perseverance, of patience, and once you become aware of an inner psychological state or psychic state or negative thought form or conditioning from early childhood and so on, you have to learn to look at it and face off with it. You need to learn to ask yourself, how can I admit that this is a part of myself, but I'm not going to let it define me anymore, and then continue to move forward. Saturn is that slow and steady force that says, yes, there's a problem here, but I'm just going to steamroll over it. Yes, there's a problem here, but I'm still moving forward. Yes, I've got these monkeys on my back and they're pulling out my hair and clawing at my skin, but I'm still moving forward slowly and steadily. So despite the fact that Saturn's going to bring up these issues for you to look at, that doesn't mean that you stop and you cripple yourself. Remember, Saturn's considered to be lame. One of the things he shared through these contemplations was, even if you feel lame, even if you feel psychologically insecure, even if you feel like you cannot move forward, you still need to try. right? Someone recently asked me a question about dashas. I recently did a video on deep understanding of dashas. And they said, well, how can we ever have a good dasha? And I said, well, if you make a good plan and you try to move forward and you do your best, you can have the best dasha possible. That's a very Saturnine idea there. So always remember that Saturn brings up things so that you can see them, become aware of them, make peace with them, love them, and move forward anyway. Even if you're crippled, even if you feel lame, even if you feel like you cannot do it, you continue to press on, because that's how you build up strength to realize that you are an aspect of a greater consciousness than what the little ego wants you to believe. Right? That's the key there. Now, that time period, January 20th around January 23rd, January 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, another thing occurs with Mercury. Mercury is going to be in a weaker state within the Navamsha, the D9, the chart that deals with our purpose and our direction in life. We're also going to have Saturn and Moon conjunction during that same time. So actually in the sky, Saturn and Moon will be conjunct. And what this shows is that from January 20th through the 23rd, this is not a real good time to be sharing your problems with others. You might want to. It's not a good time to think that you can really communicate important matters to others, things that are important to you, because the Saturn transit, along with this Mercury influence in the Navamsha, is showing that this is an internal thing. You're not supposed to say, here are my problems, let me go and ask for a prayer request on Facebook, or let me go talk to my friend and dump all these things. Saturn wants you to look at it yourself. And the Moon, coming into play with this, is showing that you're going to see the most potent emotional holes, if you want to think about it that way, holes in your emotional strength. And it's showing you how to patch them up. So whatever comes up between the 20th through the 22nd, 23rd, emotionally, things you want to share, don't share it, because Mercury is not going to help you in that regard. And with the Moon, it's showing you, here are your emotional holes that you have to attend to. All right? And if you can do that, that will prepare you to have a pretty good direction for the rest of the year, because you'll know your weaknesses and you can strengthen them. Now, as we get towards the end of January, Saturn moves closer and closer. Some would say Venus will be 4 houses away from Saturn. Venus will be doing well. Venus will be getting stronger. I did an article at Asheville Vedic Astrology.com on the upcoming Venus retrograde period, which looks to be pretty good, so you might want to go read that. But as we get towards the end of January, Venus's strength will keep building up. Will keep sharing its ishta, its beneficial influence with Saturn, which will show that as you go through this month of January, taking it slow and steady, making improvements as you go, acknowledging where your weaknesses are, attending to them, focusing on those little inner blocks that come up for you and asking, how can I move beyond them? Venus's strength indicates that all the hard work will pay off, that it will allow anyone who can tap into this and who feels like attending to this, all that work that you will be doing with Saturn this first month of the year allows you to live a life of greater fulfillment long term. So look at 2017 as a good year of paying attention to what you need to do for long-term positive change for yourself. And all of this is based upon the astrological influences that I see from Saturn. All of it is based on personal contemplations with Saturn. And we have to remember that, this is based on your relationship to the collective conscious. And we all relate to the collective consciousness in different ways. So go back, review this video, take notes on the time periods mentioned. And if you notice these things true for you, then that shows that this is how you need to work with the collective consciousness over the next year or so. If not, don't worry about it. Go along with your life. Enjoy your life. Do whatever you need to do. Realizing that these kinds of contemplations obviously aren't going to speak to everybody. because not everyone is going to be going through the exact same life circumstances. Not everyone has the exact same chart. But I suppose this is more indicative for folks who tune into my channel a lot. So keep this in mind and realize that Saturn's direction is slow and steady progress, facing your fears, facing your insecurities, and making changes. There are obviously times where that might be a little more difficult for you, January 9th through January 11th, particularly in regards to relationships. You want to avoid the fantasies. There are times when the opportunities, the insights will be greater and stronger about what you need to do, and that will be January 4th through January 6th, and January 17th through January 20th. There will be times when you feel pretty frustrated about it. And that's, again, just a moment to take back, detach, focus more on meditation, your internal work, and continue doing what you need to do to be successful in life. One of those major difficulties will be January 20th through 23rd. And as we get towards the end of January, that energy of Venus continues to grow to support Saturn, so that you will find that the realizations that you've come through all of this hard work will pay off and be very beneficial to you. Okay, so thank you for tuning in. We'll see how this goes if we want to continue this. I think it might be beneficial, but as you know, I do have some difficulties doing group transit videos. I don't quite like it a whole lot. But this has been my offering to consider those collective consciousness trends as they may be appropriate for you. So thank you again, and be well.